Today's episode, we're talking about honesty and the importance of having it in your business. You are listening to StartupU podcast. I'm your host, CMH. Here, we give you proven business advice to grow your company, teach you what peak performers do to stay on top of their game and live a healthy and happy life, plus how you can gain and keep an edge on your market. Welcome to the show. What up, fam? Welcome back to the show. Make sure you guys subscribe. And don't forget to check out StartupU. Our StartupU Mastermind is 100% free. You can start by going to getstartupu.com to check out all of the Startup University programs. All right, today we're talking to a really interesting guy, and his whole mantra, Peter's whole mantra, is about honesty in business, and more specifically, brutally honest conversations. I think that's a huge missing component. I think we have a tough time navigating that with grace, specifically with other people, but sometimes with ourselves. And I think sometimes it's necessary. So we're going to talk today about how to navigate that, what happens when you can properly introduce that into your business and navigate it to a degree that it is beneficial, but also not a detriment, right? We don't want to go too far the other way to where you are being a little too hard on yourself. And I think that's something that people really struggle with. So without further ado, let's jump into it today in my conversation with Peter Kozodoy.
Please hold for a very important message.
All right, I'm here with Peter Kozodoy, and we are going to talk about brutal honesty and its importance in your business. And there's a million things. Peter and I were talking before we hit record here, and I see this all the time, specifically people kind of transitioning or they're stuck with their business and they're not really having those honest conversations with themselves and or others about where they are and the realities of their current situation. So we're going to get into that. We're going to talk about a lot, so make sure you stick around. Peter, welcome to the show, man. How are you?
It's a pleasure to be here, Chris. Good to be here.
Cool, man. So look, let's talk first about what's currently lacking when it comes to business as you see it in relation to the brutal honesty that you talk about.
Yeah. We've entered into this gig economy where I think everyone fancies themselves an entrepreneur, right? What's interesting is if you go back 20 years, entrepreneurship wasn't all that sexy.
Right.
Like if you listen to Jim Koch, the founder of Boston Brewing Company, Sam Adams, I mean, he was like a ridiculous pioneer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like pioneer in the times of we're going to cross the reservation and hope we don't get shot in the back by Native Americans pioneer, right? And so then you fast forwarded today, and we've got all these online tools and all these incentives to go out and be your own entrepreneur. And I think part of the biggest issue as it relates to honesty is way back to think of elementary school, think of high school, think of college, think of the whole system that we're brought up in, which is about conformity, which is about how do we ace this particular test. Entrepreneurship isn't a test of what you know, it's a test of how resilient you are, how brave you are, how vulnerable you're willing to be, how many times you're able to admit to yourself that you don't know and go find the right answer. So, everyone I encounter, and I coach a lot of other entrepreneurs, I said this to you before the show, what I found is that 99% of business problems are personal problems in disguise. And sort of step number one is getting honest about that, many of the new entrepreneurs out there have to actually step into a brand new version of themselves that I think sadly society doesn't exactly ingrain in us from the beginning.
How do you know the difference? So immediately I'm thinking, I'm the type of person, I'm very hard on myself, right? Like
Join the club.
And I think a lot of type A driven people are, right? It's like, I could always do more. I could always reach higher. I'm always moving the goalpost. How do you know when, specifically with a startup, because it's so, it can be so vague in terms of like where you should be or where you could be, right? It's difficult, right? Because it does take time. There is a process to growing a business. How do you know when it's time to extend yourself a little bit of grace? You're being a little bit too hard on yourself. Maybe you're being beyond honest, a little bit negligent to yourself, versus when it's time to have an honest conversation, and or how do you navigate and not make those two necessarily binary?
I think one of the best questions I wish more entrepreneurs would ask themselves is, am I building the right business? And do I even know what the right business is? Do I know what that means? I started a company out of college. I was 22, thought I knew everything, didn't know anything. And went immediately tens of thousands of dollars into debt and spent the next 5 years sort of bouncing off the bottom of a checking account.
Right.
And we built what initially was a video production company. Well, it turns out that's really not that good of a business. How do I know? Not because I struggled with it, but because as I eventually built that and changed it into a full service marketing agency and then evolved that into other things, I was able to step into entrepreneur groups of folks that had like checklists for the types of business they were going to start. I mean, was it virtual or not? Did it have employees or not? Was it scalable or not? Was it, all these sort of things that ran through their head. And I thought to myself, I didn't even ask those questions at 22, right? It's like, I wasn't even thinking on the level of, am I even building the right business that is a cash flow generation machine that can help me be, not only a better person, but provide for my family and all these other things. And that's one of the main questions I ask a lot of folks that come to me for consulting. And their answer is like, well, I was really, good at music. So I decided to start this business of music. I'm like, how do you know that that's a good business to even start? So I think like back way up. And if you can't answer that question and you don't even know if you're building the right business or not, then how do you know the answer to the question you asked, which is, am I in too deep? Am I not deep enough? Should I keep going or not? It's if you don't know if you're running a foot race or a bike race or a swim race, how do you know how you're doing?
Yeah. You say that, and I immediately think about my favorite business book of all time, The One Thing by Gary Keller. And one of the things that he talks about in that book is asking the right questions, right? He's like, the best answers come from asking the right questions. You don't just arrive at an answer for yourself just arbitrarily, right? It's guided by you asking, I forget what he calls them, but something like pointed questions, for lack of whatever the actual term that he used was. What does a practice for you look like in making sure that that's a process that you're repeating, not just in like the existential aspects of like, is this business, tangible and viable, or versus, in this particular season, I'm not doing necessarily what I should be doing to move forward out of this season or take the next steps in the business?
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting balance. I see a lot of people just in avoidance mode, and stuck in, I don't have enough knowledge, so I'm going to keep learning, or I'm going to keep tweaking my website, or I'm going to, I need to be an expert in sales funnels. That's what I need to do. And they just dive for months into those things.
Right.
None of which they need to actually build a thriving business. In fact, something that helped me meeting other entrepreneurs who had done this, who had successful multi-million-dollar exits. I mean, they plan businesses around themselves where they work 3 hours a day and it's on their schedule and they don't want any employees and like all these things that I think the societal mantra is like, oh, we need to work 80-hour weeks and we need to, be an expert in everything. It's like, none of that's actually true. It's all BS. So once I saw others building these incredible infrastructures, I was like, hell, I mean, I can do that now that I've seen it, now that I know what it is.
Right.
And so, that's I think half the battle. One of the things I tell folks, no matter what kind of business you have, is you need to connect with other entrepreneurs. You need to connect with entrepreneurs that have done it before. I mean, you do coaching, right, Chris?
Yes.
I mean, the value you could bring to someone who doesn't have that experience, all experience is it's a time machine. It vaults you forward because you can take advantage of someone else's mistakes. And I find over and over again, the people who start from scratch and build multi-million-dollar operations, they all have that in common. They all get help.
Got it. What does that practice, I guess, look like for you? I know you mentioned a couple examples. Going throughout your day, right? What are the things? Is it just a practice where you're just trying to maybe provide triggers where you're objectively looking at things and coming to realizations? Kind of walk us through, or maybe with a client, what was that actually? I guess the reason I'm asking, let me give you some context.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, the reason I'm asking this is because I feel like a lot of people, when they say brutally honest, what they see is just, I need to be very critical of myself. And maybe it doesn't come across as a constructive effort or a constructive practice.
Yeah.
Whereas I think it's the opposite. I think I'm being brutally honest so that I'm eliminating this wasted time and energy and effort and putting it into something that is actually going to be fruitful for me going forward. So how does it look like for you to give people more of a practical application of what they can make that look like in their own life?
Sure. So what I preach, right? I was going to say teach, what I preach is strategic, brutal honesty. It's not just, hey, I'm going to be an a-hole for the sake of being a jerk. Like, that's not what this is about. In fact, that's not how you make anything happen. And that includes how you treat yourself. And I stratify strategic brutal honesty into three pieces and sort of run folks around these three pieces over and over again and make sure they're in what I call honest alignment with who they really are, what they really want, what it's going to take to get there. And those three levels are number one, what I call the community, right? What's going on in this industry, what's going on globally, what are the trends? As Warren Buffett points out, and I've seen time and again, you can build a bad business in a rising industry and actually do very well.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, you can build a fantastic business in a commodity industry and forever struggle. So, one of the things is back to the basics of, trend spotting. Are we on the right? We have this phrase, the trend is your friend, being on the right side of that. Then going one step further is getting honest with and about the others around you. We talked a lot at the beginning of this about other entrepreneurs, right? Like seeking their vulnerable stories, not being afraid to open up yourself, right? And be honest with them. And then conversely, there are times where we need to be honest about others, right? I hear all the time, I want to start a business, but my spouse won't let me quit my day job.
Right.
Well, it's time to be honest about their thoughts or feelings or fears or ego, whatever. And then finally, to your point, is honest, with and about the self. And it's really hard because I find that folks, and I'm not excluded from this list, we get stuck. We get stuck in patterns. We get stuck in, rhythms. We get stuck in assumptions. And I've never found anyone in the history of the world that can look in a mirror and break apart their own, what I call cornerstone beliefs. The assumptions that, I need to have an MBA to start a business. And it's like, no, actually, you don't have to have that at all, right? So it really helps to have someone breaking up those blocks for you, either on purpose, right? Someone like a coach, or, one thing I do is dive into books. I'm always reading about other entrepreneurs and their stories, their struggles,
Right.
to just provide context.
Yeah. I mentioned to you, one of the biggest things that we see with both of our students and our clients alike is kind of what you referenced, which is, they're either in their professional learning mode and they're telling themselves artificially and falsely, I'm not ready for this, or I don't have whatever resource that they require, or I don't have enough funding, or I don't, right? And they stay in this phase of kind of the in-between mode where it's just like, are you going to do this or not? And you've seen this probably too, but in some cases it's for years, right? We're not talking 6 months. We're talking people that I've known for a decade or it's like still in that same place. So for somebody that's in that mode, or they feel like they're stuck, or maybe they've tried a lot of things that aren't working, what would you recommend to them right now? Why is this such an important aspect of startup growth and or just accelerated growth or getting traction in your life?
Well, question number one is, who are you really? Who are you really?
Yeah.
Are you an entrepreneur? If you're 80 years old and you look back, are you the person who always knew in their heart they were a business owner, always knew they would own a multi-million-dollar company, and persevered through business ideas, tried stuff, failed, lost money, met people, burned relationships? Like, is that going to be you? Or, does that make you want to vomit? And who you really are is someone who makes 6 figures working at a company and saves in their 401k and has a nice, safe life. And
Right.
not as glamorous as you think something is. If you're not honest with, like, are you really going to do that? Or if you're really not, just shut up and stop, being an entrepreneur about it.
Yeah.
And that's okay. There's no penalty for wanting to play life safe. There's a lot of people that do very well doing that.
You say that, and I'm over here smiling because internally I'm kind of chuckling. You mentioned something, and you said 20 years ago that entrepreneurship just wasn't glamorous, it wasn't sexy, and hell, that might even be as recently as 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I it's great that it is so mainstream now. Like it's kind of like my wish was that people would understand, and maybe you felt the same way, Peter. My wish was that people would understand me, people in my family, people around me, my friends, right? No one knew why the hell I wanted to go do my own thing when I had I went to a reputable school and I had job offers and, a good salary, but it just wasn't for me. But at that time you really kind of knew, man, like this is something really I have to pursue this, but everyone else thought I was crazy. Now I feel like there's almost, that time it was peer pressure to get the job, not to go start the business. Now it's become so mainstream that it's almost peer pressure to start the business and not get a job. So I feel like there's so much opportunity, right? I always say this, we've never had more opportunity to actually start a business than we do right now today in human history. Not just in the last 10 years or 20 years, in human history to start a business. Do you feel like those options, there's options for everything now? I mean, literally everything. There's 100 million different streaming services. You don't just buy a cable from 4 providers. I mean, it's nuts. Do you feel like that's part of the challenge, is navigating all of these opportunities, all of these potential avenues that we could go down, where we just kind of lose sight of that self-awareness, or there's just too many for us to really process and figure out what's the best path for us?
Yeah, you put your finger on something really important that I call the paradox of freedom. Folks in a 9-to-5 job look at entrepreneurship a lot of times. They're like, oh my gosh, you have total freedom and you can be your own boss. And isn't that great? What they don't realize is that when you have a boss above you and a directive from some board of directors you don't know, that structure is really, really awesome. You know exactly what to do. You know exactly what tomorrow is going to look like. You know exactly what success looks like. Like, it's actually a really important thing for like the human mind, right?
Right.
And with entrepreneurs, as you very well know, I can wake up whatever time I want and I can do whatever I want. So how do I know, of the tens of thousands of permutations that my day can have, what is the exact thing I should do today? And that can be overwhelming. It can be paralyzing.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of folks don't realize that. Now, at the level you're talking about, you really have something where you're talking about, how do you figure out what kind of business I want to start?
Yeah.
That's made worse, way worse, by what I think is a big, BS kind of threat out there, which is folks on Instagram or Facebook that have built these massive followings, sharing cat videos, and now turn around and try to teach others about entrepreneurship with no business skills whatsoever, claiming that it's easy to make, $100,000 a month sharing your cat videos. That I think is not only bad for entrepreneurs, right? People who want to be business owners. It's just bad for society.
Could not agree more.
There is a vast misunderstanding about what it takes to be a successful business owner.
I agree.
And I wish more people talked about the bad side, the side where you have to fire friends and family from your own business, the side where you get divorced because your spouse, won't support you, the side where you have to move across the country to chase a dream and go tens of thousands of dollars into credit card debt. These are all stories I have heard, know people that have lived. And that's what this is really all about. It is the gauntlet.
We've I didn't know this, and maybe this is just me being I'm getting older, right? So maybe I'm just out of touch. But I used to introduce myself, and people were like, what do you do? And so I had multiple things that I did, online business, offline business, stuff like that. So I would just be like, I'm an entrepreneur. And I didn't know this. My friend has a local business, and he said, to a degree of what you just said, he was like, you have no idea how many kids are coming in here and just writing entrepreneur on their like employment status. And it literally just means that they started an Instagram page and just put entrepreneur on their bio. And that like qualifies them as an entrepreneur. It's so embarrassing. So I've had to change and call myself a business owner, which I used to refute because I said I'm more than a business owner. To me, a business owner is somebody, and I'm not, there wasn't disparagingly saying that, but I'm like, but I do more than like own a local mom and pop. So what, like I'm technically not a bit, anyways. So I kind of a side tangent, but yeah, I totally agree with you that the nature of the industry has made it harder, I think, to create credibility, maybe because there's just so many people out there doing what you just said, right? Just fluff business or marketing themselves in a way that's really black hat or like doing really shoddy tactics and stuff like that. It's just really, really hurt us. So, and I think honestly, if we're being really candid, that ties back into the honesty conversation of, right? Like, here's what the market is indicating to me. These are what people are doing. How do I cut through the noise? And I think maybe some honesty is good for your marketing too. Would you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. I have case study after case study in my book talking about how companies that just put it out there. Hey, I'm sorry, this product sucks. We're going to do better. That really didn't go well. Hey, let's put cameras in our conference room, record what we're doing so everyone can see. It does really well.
Wow. Do you think though that, so let's say this, let's say I'm throwing stones I'm selling a digital course, right? Which is actively what I do. And in that I created a webinar and I actively was throwing stones at the influencers that are similar to what you described, that have never built a real business, that have just literally just found a gimmick online that they can just hack, right? And maybe they've made a buck, maybe they haven't, but they built a big following and they're trying to, say that I'm the whatever, and they have no idea how to do anything outside of just build an audience on one platform.
Yeah.
Do you think that it's wise to just brutally honest in your marketing, whether it's a webinar or your sales page or what have you, just to throw stones at the nature of the industry because it will resonate at a deep and meaningful level, and people are kind of craving for that true honesty and candor?
I mean, throw stones, I'm going to say no for a couple of reasons.
Okay.
One is and I've known some pretty big influencers. We can't discount the emotional ties that they build with their people.
That's true.
If you have a snake oil salesman roll into a medieval town and you have something akin to cancer, and this guy standing there saying, this vial, I know it costs, 3 months worth of your wheat, pulling, salary,
right,
is going to save you and your mom and whatever else. Like, the belief in that is so strong that the last thing you want, this is, honest about others, right? The last thing you want to do is come in just like literally or figuratively throw stones at that snake oil salesman, no matter who they are.
right.
Now, there's a difference between that and helping people see the man behind the curtain of Oz, right?
Yeah, right.
And I think there's a tactful way to do that. And I think it's really important. I mean, you and I are having a conversation with each other about these things. Maybe some listener is thinking to themselves, wow, that influencer that I watch all the time, and they really do kind of try to sell me this, that, and the other. And, did they actually ever go to college? Like, do they, not that that's a be all end all, but do they have any other qualifications whatsoever? I think these are important questions for people to ask. And what's fascinating to me is how the snake oil salesperson just hasn't gone away. They've just morphed into something else. And I think that's sad and indicative of people's, human psychology and how willing folks are to believe that there is a shortcut, for instance.
Yeah. One of the things that I like, and as I think we just exemplified it, it extends beyond just a conversation of one, right? Obviously, a lot of my audience, they're solopreneurs, right? They're an online business owner, so they're largely, if they have a virtual assistant, that's like the extent of their team. So obviously, I wanted to focus on like the extent that it would apply to them, meaning brutally honest conversations with yourself or your family or whatever that entails as it relates to you and your business. Obviously, now talking about marketing, let's talk about how it applies to eventually when you have a team. Again, another, I think, epic book. I'm sure you've read it and it maybe influenced your work, maybe it didn't. But with Jim Collins and Good to Great, I think one of the main things that he talks about is having those really honest conversations within your team. What would you add to what he says? It's only a sliver of his book, in a chapter. Yours, obviously, you wrote an entire book about it. What is the importance of having brutally honest conversations within an organization, and how does that benefit the growth or the health of that company?
It's people know, right? I hear so many times. I did 2 workshops last week, group of executives, both. And in both cases, there were multiple folks in the room that said, yeah, I have this person working for me. I mean, they're not the best person. I know that, they cause problems. And I said to them, do you think your other employees know that this person's not ideal for the culture? Like, yeah, probably. I said, what do you think they think of you as the leader allowing this to go on?
Mm.
So, folks in the organization know, they can smell BS. They, have a feeling that good old HR line, about, oh, we're going to make cutbacks and blah, blah, blah. Like, just come out and say, like, yeah, we're not doing well. I'm sorry. I messed up. I thought this, it turned out to be that. This is terrible. I hope I learned from it. Thank you all for helping me learn from it. I mean, just be real. There's nothing to be afraid of. And what happens is you drop ego barriers, right? It's not us against them anymore. We can all kind of have an honest conversation about it. And folks respect that, even in the face of bad news. Studies have shown that people just respect when you just come out and you're honest about it. And
Cool.
Without that trust and respect, I mean, what are we doing? Like, military will tell you there's none of that, then nothing's getting done.
So I think maybe in the same vein of what I asked before, so there's a level of brutal honesty in your marketing, like I talked about, and then stepping beyond and throwing stones, and you felt like that was too far. At what point, I feel like immediately I thought of this when you mentioned is where you're expressing too much candor in the way you communicate with your team. It's too honest. It's kind of TMI, where I've seen people, and I've seen people look in the mirror as the person that I saw as I'm relating to this, where you kind of start off and you're a little bit too like friend zone type with your employees because you are being honest and you do want to have that expression of honesty in your company. How do you kind of draw the line or have guardrails in place to make sure that you're being honest with what's going on, being honest with the direction of the company, being honest with what your thoughts are, with what you guys are actively doing in the company, but then not taking it a step beyond to the point where it's either TMI or you'll see this, but people start to lose. They can't handle the dynamic, maybe for lack of a better term, of a boss that's being so transparent about what's going on with the company. And so it's kind of hard for them to still view it as a workplace. And maybe that's my own subjective experience, but I've seen it with a couple of people as well.
No, it's a great question. And I see it all the time. So it comes down to two things. Number one, as a leader, what are your core values? If your core values are something like, complete openness and transparency, then TMI doesn't really exist, right? And if the company's core values, as an extension of the leader, also supports something like that, and you imagine you're in a meeting where everyone's encouraged to share everything all the time, and that's okay, it doesn't matter. And by the way, Bridgewater Associates, the largest hedge fund in the world, grew to 160 billion in assets by having that exact model. I mean, it is TMI all the time, radical truth and radical transparency. That's what their culture is built on. It's expected. Wow. Now, if you take that and you bring it over to a leader who doesn't really believe in that, right? They're quiet, they're reserved, they're thoughtful. The company is quiet and reserved and thoughtful, and we withhold, how we're feeling because we want to make it about the data and the analysis and the logic. Then one culture is not going to mesh well with another. Now, where companies get in trouble is in two spots. Number one, they fail to define what the culture is and why they've created it that way. And number two, either because they haven't defined it or because they bring the wrong people that don't fit the culture.
Got it.
Because whether it's defined or not, the culture's there. And then if you bring the wrong people, and not because they're a wrong person, but because they just don't fit the values, right? Then we have problems. Then you have people who are like, why does that person, share about, the intimate details of her aunt's sad passing over the weekend? Like, I don't want to hear all that morbid stuff, right? Yeah. Whereas they're thinking like, oh, isn't this wonderful? We all get to share and have that friend barrier and this, that. Like, we need to get on the same page about that.
But first, okay, I'm going to play contrarian. I'm sorry.
Go for it. I love that.
But for a lot of startups, it's easy to say you establish the culture. And I think the hard part is that the evolution of a startup, and more importantly, the evolution of you, the founder of the company, you're growing, the company's changing. You may have thought this is what your culture was. Obviously, if you built it on your values, that's those should largely stay the same, but you do grow as a person. Sure. What do you do in a situation where, hey, this is what we started as, and I've kind of grown and evolved, as has the company, and now it's not what I wanted it to be. Now I'm kind of leaning in this direction where I want to be a little bit more open about what's going on, but people were indoctrinated into being a certain way, and now they're not. Is it I've got to clean the slate and start with new people, or is there a way to kind of hit a soft reset button on what that culture ends up becoming and incorporating the honesty aspect in that?
This is the perfect place for strategic, brutal honesty. So I was working with a guy for a couple of years, came to me under $1 million in revenue. Now he does multi-millions in revenue. Mm. One day he came to me and he said, I want to fire all my staff members. I was like, okay, let's talk about that. So why do you want to fire them? He said, because I've spent all this time growing as a person and I am so much better, right? I'm the new version of me, not the old version of me, but all of them are stuck with the way it used to be.
Right.
And I can't get them to adopt these new practices. I can't get them to understand why this is so important. So I said to him, well, that's interesting. I said, this is a question I teach in my workshops. I said, how do people change? How do humans make change? Like, how do they up and decide they're going to be different one day? He said, well, they get, they get cancer or they get in a car crash, right? They have some big momentous thing happen in their life. I said, yeah, exactly. I said, you and I have been having these little car crashes every session we talk, right? Car crash, little shift. They haven't had any of that.
Yeah.
And here you are expecting them to have had the same experience and come to the same conclusion. You have done a poor job of bringing them along.
Right.
It was his responsibility to have car crashes with his entire team, right? To bring them along. Then Chris, if folks aren't coming along, then it's time for new people.
Got it.
That's the brutal truth. And any founder who has grown to many millions and then hundreds of millions will tell you that the folks you start with are not the folks you end with.
Yeah.
It's just the way it is.
And it's tough. It's tough because, I know the adage is like, what got you here won't get you there.
Exactly.
But
Marshall Goldsmith.
but you also find a level of, you can be wrapped up in loyalty to those people for helping you make your vision a reality, and largely those people, like, they really bought in, and they it's almost like they're resentful of the fact that things aren't the way they used to be, and it sucks, right? It's a really crappy feeling to have. But the other thing that I've seen too, and I think this is maybe even more important to address, is the founder will sit on that. Again, not that I'm ever been guilty of this, right? Look in the mirror here.
Wink, wink.
Well, yeah, right. Resistant to have that conversation like you're talking about, like that come to Jesus conversation of brutal honesty.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that they've established such an affinity for those people, and it's really hard to almost feel like you're turning your back on them because you decided that things were changing. You decided you were a new version of you, and the company was this new thing, and you were going this new direction. And now all of a sudden they don't have job security potentially because you decided this. So I think a lot of people, it's hard for them to have that conversation of that brutal honesty, and like, this is the moment we're changing, and like, you got to get with the program, or you got to go find a job somewhere else. How do you recommend they navigate that conversation? Timely, so they don't build it up for years and then have a really nasty version of it when it's like they're at their wit's end, which happens all the time. And then B, how do they address that conversation to where it's more of a empowering opportunity versus a threat to change?
Yeah, it is an empowering opportunity. It always is, by definition, and that's a matter of mindset and perspective. If you wake up tomorrow and someone's stolen your car and shut down one of your companies, and there's nothing you can do about it, that is an amazing opportunity to grow. Right. And you can dispute that fact, but it's only going to be at your peril. So that's an awfully good thing to have in your culture, by the way, is, we overcome whatever comes our way because it sets you up for that conversation. Secondly, to your point, you need to have that conversation early. I can't tell you how many times I should have had that conversation earlier, and I waited too long, and that was really stupid. That's my problem, not theirs.
Right.
And I've had to learn the hard way.
Right.
What's interesting is, like, the public, right? People in general understand this because they all have seen the show and the movie and read the book about the founder that, kicks out his friends that helped him start the company. And, oh, isn't he a villain or she a villain? Right. And like
the Ray Kroc example.
Yeah, exactly. Ray Kroc, even Mark Zuckerberg, or some of his earlier folks,
Yep.
And then as entrepreneurs get into that situation because they've had success, because they have this sort of, an opportunity and a challenge, right? That comes with getting to a certain point. They get it. It's gray. It's not about, oh, I'm a villain now because I'm greedy about money. It's, a lot of the things you were saying, the soft stuff. I've grown, I'm different. I see the world differently as an entrepreneur, and once you see that, you can't unsee it. If that weren't true, people would never get divorced. Right? They would always be at the exact moment that they got married, happy, etc., and divorce would not be a thing. So we kind of know intuitively that people change, and by extension, organizations need to change.
Wouldn't you say that? So I'm glad you brought up divorce. I think it's a relevant example. I would say that the reason that like come to Jesus talk has to happen to begin with is because of lack of consistent and daily brutally honest conversation.
100%.
Right.
That's
so same with your business.
Soapbox.
Right. Same with your business. If the reason you're having to have that come to Jesus talk is probably because you've been putting it off 100%. And or you haven't practiced that every day to be like growing as an organization in the direction that you're growing as a person and as a business.
How about the lies? Oh, it'll get better on its own. They'll change. I'll feel differently tomorrow. It's all BS.
They just had a bad day or a bad week.
Right. Oh, right. Yeah. They'll get it eventually. That conversation went well. They're coming around. In the back of our minds, we know.
Yeah. So anyway, definitely demonstrates. Do you also think that's a good idea? And I think we talked about hiring to really set the tone. And this is something we've done, kind of not to recuse ourselves, so to speak, but really to make sure that we're setting the right precedent. I think everybody thinks that like, oh, working for a startup is going to be this like fun, exciting thing. And like it is. I think you get to really see your impact right? Whereas you could just be a cog in the wheel working for a big corporation and they would largely forget you were there. You could sit around and watch Netflix all day. Some people, that's great. That's like the dream. And other people are like, I want to see that I'm making an impact and I'm actually like valued and doing something.
Totally.
So in your hiring process, you think it's good to be like, here's the deal. I'm a startup founder. I've never done this before, right? Like starting from brutal honesty from day one.
Of course,
right?
Sets the precedent.
And being like, this is going to change and it's going to evolve and we're going to need you to wear different hats and you're going to have to like push yourself in ways maybe you didn't expect, or like some days I'm going to have a crazy, I always tell people this, I'm like, I'm a crazy entrepreneur and some days I'm going to wake up and I'm going to have a crazy idea and you're just going to have to know that's who I am, right? And so my team largely knows. Sometimes Chris is going to have a lot of ideas and sometimes some of them are going to be good and we're going to pursue, and then others are just not going to ever evolve into anything because it's part of him just being a visionary entrepreneur type. So I think, you know, kind of going back to like the day-to-day conversations, it sounds like from what you're saying, in your hiring, even like day zero, building in that brutally honest conversation and just being very transparent about who you are, where I feel like a lot of us, maybe we try to posture as we have our shit together, for lack of a better term, right? Like, oh, we know what we are. Like, we know. But reality of the situation is we don't, and things change a lot, and we kind of posture otherwise. So it sounds like even starting from your hiring process, womb to tomb, it should be brutally honest conversation.
Yeah, because otherwise you just simply set yourself up for failure.
Right.
You know, if you, and this is something, again, I had to learn, right? Because in the beginning, I think we all think we know it. So, you know, for some startup founders listening to this that maybe aren't there yet, I hope they're getting a real eye-opening education. They heed these warnings, because when you say to someone like, yeah, I don't have it all figured out, this is going to be a shit show at times.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you for all kinds of things. You know, by the way, I heard that once we grow, you're actually going to have to stop wearing so many hats and specialize. I don't even know if that's true, but hey, we're going to try it.
Right.
And what that does is that it level sets an expectation where all you have to do then is live up to it. And by the way, it's the truth, so it should be pretty easy. Yeah. I mean, I've gotten to the point, Chris, where, you know, I'm doing a new hire literally today and tomorrow. I gave him all of my financial projections for a new company I'm starting. I'm like, here's what we think is going to happen. I have no idea if it's going to happen, but here, there's no reason to not be transparent anymore. It's so much easier.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about it as you were saying that. I feel like it makes that, if there is a need for the tough conversation down the road, it makes it much easier because you've already set a precedent, right? Like so if your financial projections are off based on what you told that person, at least you were open and honest about, this is what we're shooting for, but we don't know, but this is what we're shooting for. Because then I also think that it empowers that person to like help you actually achieve that. And they feel like they're actively involved with that versus like keeping them, right? Like if they're not involved with that, then it's like they just show up and do whatever function is they're required to do. But if they really know, they can kind of take more ownership. One of the biggest things I think that a lot of startup founders will find is they want their team to like take ownership of their role. And it's like, but you're not giving them anything or enough for them to really take ownership of, really including them with the core nucleus of the conversations as far as like the pertinent things that need to be discussed and addressed in the company. So it's kind of oxymoronic in a way.
Yep. Yeah, and I forget who it was, Peter Diamandis or one of the big Silicon Valley guys. He said, you know, it's all about incentives. Right. If you align incentives correctly, people will do exactly what you want them to do and what's in their best interest to do.
Yeah. And I'm sure you found out, as have many, that it usually doesn't revolve around money. It's usually other things.
No, correct. Absolutely.
Yeah, which is crazy. You would always think they're like, oh yeah, I'll pay you X amount of money. And most times that's not the case.
Very rare, actually. We studied that at business school. You know, the number one reason why people leave a company, and it's never money.
It's never money.
I mean, money's like number 8 on the list.
Isn't that crazy?
Number 1 is the direct boss above you, the person in charge.
It's so wild, man. Cool. All right, so I want people to kind of get a view. Obviously, if they're watching the video clip of any of these, they're seeing you've got your Honest to Greatness book. Kind of peel back the curtain. I probably talked about a lot of what you talk about in the book, but what can they expect to learn more about as it relates to them being startup founder, even if they're a solopreneur? Yeah,
you know, what's interesting is it actually started as a marketing book. I wrote a marketing book because I was frustrated that you know, of all the clients that I worked with and all the folks I saw over the years, and I mean, we worked with startups of the Fortune 500, even threw a party for Warren Buffett once. I mean, we ran the gamut. And I was always frustrated by how simple they needed to behave. They just needed to be honest, you know, at the levels I talk about, right? Community, others, self, and they would have done fantastic. And then, by the way, the clients we had that were just willing to be honest, you know, about what they did and didn't know about our relationship, about their relationship with vendors and partners and suppliers and everything else, they just crushed it. But it was actually my agent who said, this isn't really, yeah, it has marketing implications, but it's about so much more than that.
Yeah.
It's about how we lead organizations, about how we lead our families, how we lead ourselves. So it really morphed into something much, much bigger. And we've touched on a lot of those things. How do we think? We talked about cornerstone beliefs earlier. How do we identify those self-limiting beliefs? How do we begin to ask ourselves the right questions and ultimately lead a life of alignment? And it really comes down to alignment. Folks out there listening who just have that nagging thing in the back of their minds, that pit in their stomach, like I'm not in the right place. I know I'm not in the right place. That's the time for strategic, brutal honesty. The questions you'll learn in the book, how do I know, why do I believe what I believe? Who can I get, put around me? Who's lying to me? Someone in your life is lying to you. How do you figure that out? Because there's so much personal growth to unlock. You ask the right questions, to your point, the answers are actually always easy to come by. It's the questions that we mess up.
Cool. Sounds amazing, man. I'm going to check it out for sure. Where's the link they can find both you, but also access to locate where the book is?
Yeah, so come have an honest conversation. I'm at honest2greatness.com. That's honest2greatness.com. There you can actually take the free 21-question honesty quiz, which will tell you how honest you really are, if you're brave enough to know. It gives you a downloadable workbook to kind of take yourself and your teams through all this and unlock some serious monetary value in your business. I want to be clear about that. Like, I think people should be, honest, like moral and ethical and all that crap. That's not what this is about. Like, ethics, cool. This is about how do organizations make money in an economy, in a society that has never been so transparent. Yeah. Cell phones recording everything. Everyone somewhere knows what's going on in that environment. How do we prosper? And it is with strategic, brutal honesty.
I love it. Well said. All right, Peter, man, this was great, dude. I enjoyed the conversation. Thanks so much for dropping by. Guys, those links will be included in the show notes. And Peter, man, I'll be in touch. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks for being honest.
All right, buddy. See ya. All right, big thanks to Pete for dropping by, hanging out with us on the show. Make sure you guys check the show notes to browse over, connect with him, and check out our StartupU programs, including the StartupU Mastermind. Don't forget to subscribe, leave me a review. See you guys in the next one.